Imagine this: you're standing in a room full of people, but there's one person whose presence makes your skin crawl. You can't quite put your finger on it, but something feels off, like you're being manipulated, pulled into a web of deceit. They smile at you, but behind that smile, there's something darker lurking. You've probably experienced this feeling before, when you question if someone in your life might be hiding something sinister. The truth is, evil can wear many masks, and sometimes, it's so cleverly disguised that you can't even recognize it until it's too late. But what if you could spot the signs before it's too late? What if you could learn to see through the facades and protect yourself from toxic people who thrive on manipulation and control? In this eye-opening message, we'll uncover 8 telltale signs that you might be dealing with someone who has evil intentions. These are the behaviors that prey on your trust, your emotions, and your very sense of reality. Get ready to recognize the red flags and empower yourself to break free from toxic influences. So, do you think you're safe? Or is there someone around you who might just be hiding in plain sight? Keep watching, because the truth is more shocking than you think. 1. Playing the victim. In the realm of spirituality, one of the most profound lessons we learn is the importance of personal responsibility and inner growth. The tendency for some individuals to adopt the role of the victim is a reflection of their resistance to facing their own challenges and taking responsibility for their lives. Spiritually, playing the victim often comes from a place of insecurity and fear. Instead of confronting their own inner turmoil or taking the steps required to heal, these individuals seek to manipulate the emotions of others, casting themselves as the helpless party in an effort to gain sympathy or support. When someone chooses to present themselves as a victim, they are essentially creating an illusion. They exaggerate or fabricate situations where they are powerless, wronged, or suffering, sometimes to an extent that clouds the truth. In spiritual teachings, the concept of illusion is central. What we see or feel may not always align with reality. The victim's mindset is rooted in an illusion of powerlessness, ignoring the higher truth that we all have the capacity to transcend our circumstances through inner transformation. By adopting this role, individuals avoid accountability for their actions and their lives. Spirituality teaches us that we are responsible for the energy we bring into the world and how we respond to life's challenges. When we take ownership of our actions, we empower ourselves to change. However, those who play the victim avoid this responsibility, instead shifting the blame onto others or external circumstances. This refusal to take ownership keeps them stuck in a cycle of dependence, unable to heal or grow spiritually. The spiritual path encourages us to develop a deeper awareness of the dynamics within our relationships. Those who constantly portray themselves as victims exploit others' natural empathy, drawing them into a web of emotional manipulation. They create an illusion of suffering that others feel compelled to alleviate. However, spiritual wisdom reminds us that true healing and compassion do not come from enabling unhealthy behaviors but from empowering others to find their own strength and light. By constantly rescuing or supporting someone who refuses to take responsibility, we are contributing to a cycle of disempowerment. To avoid falling into this cycle, it's essential to cultivate discernment and set healthy boundaries. We must recognize when someone is genuinely in need and when they are playing the victim for manipulation. In doing so, we create space for true healing and growth, both for ourselves and for those around us. In the end, the spiritual journey is about embracing our own power, taking responsibility, and helping others do the same. 2. Silent treatment or emotional withdrawal. In spiritual teachings, one of the most profound aspects of human connection is the ability to communicate openly and with compassion. The silent treatment or emotional withdrawal is a behavior that goes against this core principle, using emotional disconnect as a means of control. At its essence, this tactic stems from fear of vulnerability, fear of facing one's own emotions, and fear of genuine, honest communication. Spiritually, when we withdraw or withhold affection from others, we are also withdrawing from the connection to our higher self, where compassion and understanding reside. Emotionally withdrawing or using the silent treatment creates an environment of confusion, anxiety, and insecurity. In a spiritual context, this type of behavior creates a dissonance between individuals that disrupts the natural flow of energy, which should ideally be open and reciprocal. When someone withholds communication or affection, they instill guilt in others, making them question what went wrong or why they are being punished. This approach feeds into the illusion that connection can only exist if one party conforms to the expectations or demands of the other. But spiritually, true connection is built on acceptance, trust, and mutual respect, qualities that cannot be achieved through manipulation. The silent treatment is, at its core, an attempt to exert power over someone by denying them emotional connection. This manipulation tactic causes the affected individual to constantly seek approval or reassurance, caught in a cycle of trying to fix or please the person who is emotionally withdrawing. This dynamic reinforces the manipulator's control and deepens the sense of emotional dependence. Spiritually, this kind of control is harmful because it stunts both personal growth and emotional healing. In any true spiritual practice, the focus is on healing oneself and cultivating relationships that honor one another's autonomy and individuality. When we engage in the silent treatment or emotional withdrawal, we are not practicing the principles of love and understanding. Instead, we are creating walls, shutting others out, and limiting the flow of energy that connects us. From a spiritual perspective, this type of behavior prevents us from growing and evolving together, as we are too focused on power dynamics rather than love and harmony. Healing comes when we embrace honest, open communication, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable with one another. Recognizing that emotional withdrawal and the silent treatment are forms of control helps us step away from toxic patterns and move towards a space where love, compassion, and true connection thrive. Through spiritual awareness, we can learn to communicate from a place of empathy and kindness, fostering relationships based on mutual respect and understanding. 3. Triangulation. In the realm of spirituality, we are taught that true harmony and peace arise from unity and understanding. Triangulation, a tactic used to manipulate and control, runs contrary to these values. It is the act of drawing a third person into an issue or conflict between two individuals to create division and chaos. This behavior, at its core, is driven by the ego's desire for control and superiority. Spiritually, it reflects an imbalance in the flow of energy, disrupting the natural state of unity that exists when people communicate directly and with openness. When someone uses triangulation, they deliberately foster confusion and discord by sharing one-sided or distorted information. This creates a rift between two people, causing them to distrust each other and weakening their connection. In spiritual practice, the path to enlightenment and inner peace is through understanding, compassion, and communication. Triangulation, on the other hand, is rooted in fear and manipulation. The individual employing triangulation is often seeking to assert power over others, pitting them against each other so that they can maintain control of the narrative. This behavior does not come from a place of love or genuine connection but from a desire to manipulate and influence situations to their advantage. Spiritually, triangulation disrupts the natural flow of relationships. Instead of fostering trust and open communication, it introduces conflict and uncertainty. The manipulator keeps both parties in a state of doubt, making them dependent on them for clarity and resolution. This creates a toxic dynamic, where the individuals involved are kept in a state of confusion and isolation, unable to fully trust one another or resolve the issue at hand. From a spiritual perspective, this goes against the idea of collective growth and healing. True spiritual connections are built on trust, understanding, and shared wisdom, not manipulation and deceit. The consequences of triangulation extend beyond the immediate conflict. It causes deep emotional and spiritual wounds. Those involved may begin to question their own perceptions, leading to a lack of confidence and self-doubt. The manipulator, by maintaining control over the situation, ensures that both individuals are kept in a state of uncertainty, unable to resolve the situation on their own. This dynamic leaves both parties vulnerable, and in many cases, it causes long-term damage to their relationship. To break free from the cycle of triangulation, it is crucial to return to spiritual principles of truth, integrity, and open communication. By addressing issues directly and honestly, we can restore balance and trust in our relationships. In doing so, we not only protect ourselves from manipulation but also create an environment where love, understanding, and spiritual growth can flourish. 4. Using flattery or charm to coerce. In the spiritual journey, true connection and love are based on authenticity, trust, and mutual respect. However, some individuals with malicious intent use excessive flattery or charm as a form of manipulation, a tactic that directly contradicts these core spiritual principles. At its heart, this behavior stems from an ego-driven desire to control or influence others, rather than from a place of genuine love or appreciation. When someone uses flattery or charm excessively, they are often attempting to lower the defenses of the other person, making them more vulnerable to manipulation. Flattery, when used for coercion, is not about acknowledging the true essence of a person but rather about building a false sense of admiration. The manipulator showers compliments in an exaggerated manner to make the target feel special, elevating their sense of self-worth. In a spiritual context, this is a distortion of the concept of love and respect. True spiritual growth comes from a place of humility, where we see the value in others not for what we can gain from them, but for their inherent worth. Manipulation through flattery, on the other hand, is a superficial means of creating dependency, not authenticity. Another layer of this manipulation is the creation of a false sense of closeness. By overexpressing affection or admiration, the manipulator seeks to forge a bond quickly, aiming to make the target feel indebted or obligated to them. In a spiritually healthy relationship, love and affection develop gradually, rooted in trust, vulnerability, and shared experiences. The manipulator, however, accelerates this process in order to achieve personal gain, whether it be favors, compliance, or control. This approach is ultimately transactional, rather than transformative, and undermines the integrity of the relationship. Spiritually, one of the most important lessons is to cultivate discernment, the ability to see beyond appearances and recognize when we are being manipulated. Manipulators often use charm and flattery to obscure their true motives, making it difficult for others to resist their influence. However, as we grow spiritually, we develop a deeper sense of self-awareness and intuition. By tuning into our inner wisdom, we can recognize when someone's affection or praise is not rooted in genuine care but in a desire for control. To protect ourselves from this type of manipulation, it is essential to remain grounded in our own self-worth and not be swayed by superficial praise. True spiritual growth involves learning to see the essence of others, to give and receive love without expectation, and to engage in relationships that honor our boundaries. By remaining authentic and discerning, we can navigate the world with integrity, free from the influence of those who seek to manipulate through charm or flattery. 5. Projecting their own negative traits onto others. In the spiritual journey, one of the most profound lessons we learn is the power of self-awareness and personal growth. To truly heal and evolve, we must be willing to look inward, confront our flaws, and take responsibility for our actions. However, individuals with toxic tendencies may resort to projecting their own negative traits onto others as a defense mechanism. This projection serves as a way to deflect attention from their own flaws or wrongdoings and avoid accountability. Spiritually, this behavior represents an imbalance in the individual's energy, as they are unwilling to face the truth of their own inner landscape. Projecting one's flaws onto others is a form of manipulation that is deeply rooted in fear and insecurity. People who engage in this behavior often accuse others of actions or characteristics they themselves possess, such as calling others selfish when they are the ones being selfish. From a spiritual perspective, this is a form of ego defense, where the individual's sense of self is so fragile that they cannot bear to acknowledge their own shortcomings. Rather than growing from the experience and learning from their mistakes, they attempt to shift the blame onto someone else, creating confusion and keeping themselves in a state of denial. Blaming others for problems that they themselves are responsible for is another common form of projection. In doing so, the manipulator creates a false narrative, one where they are not at fault and do not have to face the consequences of their actions. This tactic not only undermines the possibility of resolution but also erodes trust and mutual understanding. Spiritually, this behavior keeps the individual trapped in a cycle of dishonesty and denial, preventing them from reaching a state of true self-awareness and growth. By refusing to take responsibility, they miss the opportunity for healing and inner transformation. Gaslighting, a more extreme form of projection, is when the manipulator suggests that the problems someone else is facing are the result of their own actions, rather than taking responsibility for their own behavior. This manipulation causes the victim to question their own reality, thoughts, and actions, creating emotional confusion and self-doubt. Spiritually, gaslighting represents a profound distortion of the truth, as it denies the victim's experience and forces them to look outside themselves for validation. It is a dangerous tactic that prevents both parties from engaging in meaningful self-reflection and growth. In spiritual practice, one of the greatest tools for healing is the ability to reflect on ourselves with honesty and integrity. To break free from the cycle of projection, we must learn to accept our own flaws, take responsibility for our actions, and be open to growth. Through self-awareness and inner work, we can free ourselves from toxic behaviors and build relationships based on authenticity, trust, and mutual respect. This path of spiritual growth encourages us to see beyond the projections of others and focus on our own healing, allowing us to move forward with clarity and peace. 6. Unpredictable or volatile behavior. In the spiritual journey, one of the central principles is the cultivation of inner peace, emotional balance, and harmony in relationships. However, some individuals, particularly those with manipulative tendencies, create a state of emotional instability by engaging in unpredictable or volatile behavior. This type of behavior is rooted in fear, insecurity, and a desire for control. Spiritually, it represents a profound disconnection from one's true self and an inability to ground oneself in a place of love and understanding. Rather than embracing peace and emotional maturity, these individuals use volatility as a tool to manipulate others and maintain power over their environment. Unpredictable behavior, such as sudden mood swings or explosive reactions, is often employed to keep others on edge. The manipulator creates an atmosphere of uncertainty, where those around them feel as though they are walking on eggshells, never knowing what to expect. Spiritually, this type of emotional turbulence disrupts the natural flow of energy between individuals. Healthy relationships are built on trust and predictability, where both parties feel safe and understood. Volatile behavior, however, introduces chaos and confusion, preventing individuals from establishing authentic, peaceful connections. One of the most damaging aspects of this behavior is the use of anger or tantrums to intimidate others into compliance. Rather than engaging in mature, open communication, the manipulator uses outbursts to control the situation and force others to submit to their desires. From a spiritual perspective, this behavior stems from a lack of emotional maturity and an inability to process feelings in a healthy way. Anger, when not managed properly, creates dissonance and blockages in the energy field, making it difficult to foster genuine understanding and compassion. The manipulator's goal is to maintain power and control, using fear and intimidation as tools to get their way. Another common tactic is withholding affection or warmth without explanation, creating a sense of uncertainty in the relationship. This act of emotional withdrawal is a subtle but powerful manipulation, as it makes the other person feel confused and anxious, wondering what went wrong. Spiritually, withholding love and affection is a form of disconnection, preventing the flow of compassion and energy that sustains meaningful relationships. In a healthy dynamic, love is freely given, and affection is not used as a tool for control. Manipulators use these tactics to ensure that they have control over how others behave around them, creating a cycle of appeasement and emotional exhaustion. Spiritually, this pattern keeps individuals stuck in fear, unable to break free from the cycle of emotional manipulation. The key to breaking free from such patterns is to cultivate inner peace, set clear boundaries, and prioritize self-love and self-care. By grounding ourselves in spiritual practices such as mindfulness, meditation, and emotional awareness, we can protect ourselves from the volatility of others and create relationships that are rooted in trust, respect, and authentic connection. 7. Constantly seeking attention or praise. In the spiritual journey, we learn that true self-worth and inner peace come from within, not from external validation. However, individuals with narcissistic or manipulative tendencies often have an insatiable need for attention and praise. They seek constant external approval because they have not yet connected to their own inner sense of value. This behavior reflects a deep spiritual imbalance, as it reveals an individual who is disconnected from their true self and reliant on others for their sense of identity and worth. One of the most common signs of someone who constantly seeks attention is their tendency to steer conversations back to themselves, regardless of the topic. This focus on self at the expense of others reflects an ego-driven need to be at the center of attention. Spiritually, this behavior prevents them from being present with others or engaging in meaningful, compassionate interactions. When the energy is continually directed towards self-promotion or validation, it creates a barrier to genuine connection. True spiritual growth comes from being present and attuned to others, offering compassion and support without expecting anything in return. Expecting admiration or praise for actions that are either minimal or unremarkable is another hallmark of this behavior. Individuals with this tendency will often fish for compliments or accolades, even for tasks that do not require special recognition. Spiritually, this reflects a lack of humility and an attachment to the ego's need for external affirmation. The practice of humility is an essential element of spiritual growth. It is through humility that we learn to be at peace with ourselves without relying on others to define our worth. When we are grounded in our own self-awareness and inner truth, we no longer need to seek external validation. Using others as an audience for their accomplishments is another manipulative tactic employed by those with an excessive need for attention. They constantly seek acknowledgement for even minor successes, seeking to bolster their fragile sense of self. This creates an unhealthy dynamic in relationships, where the other person may feel exhausted or used. Spiritually, this behavior takes away from the natural flow of energy in the relationship. Relationships based on mutual respect and love involve giving and receiving without the expectation of validation. Those who constantly seek attention or praise are often spiritually disconnected, relying on the external world to feed their ego rather than cultivating an inner sense of peace. To break free from this pattern, it is important to cultivate self-awareness and spiritual practices that nurture self-love and inner peace. By focusing on developing a deeper connection with our higher self, we can transcend the need for external validation and embrace the quiet confidence that comes from knowing our own worth. When we no longer need to seek attention, we can engage in relationships built on authenticity, where both individuals are free to share and grow without the need for constant praise. 8. Creating a false sense of urgency. In the spiritual realm, the practice of mindfulness and self-awareness is essential for navigating the challenges of life with clarity and integrity. Manipulators, however, often prey on a person's sense of urgency to cloud their judgment, forcing them into hasty decisions that may not align with their highest good. The tactic of creating a false sense of urgency is rooted in fear and control, as it aims to pressure the victim into acting quickly without properly considering their options. Spiritually, this behavior reveals an ego-driven need to control the outcome, rather than allowing things to unfold naturally in alignment with divine timing. Manipulators often use the tactic of framing situations as time-sensitive emergencies to pressure others into making decisions under duress. This strategy undermines the spiritual practice of being present and patient, reminding us that the universe unfolds in its own time, and rushing decisions can lead to confusion and regret. Spiritually, we are taught to trust the process and allow things to manifest in their own time. By forcing a sense of urgency, the manipulator tries to bypass this natural rhythm, taking advantage of the victim's stress or confusion to manipulate the situation to their advantage. However, the wisdom of the Spirit tells us that when we rush, we create space for fear and anxiety to cloud our higher knowing, making it more difficult to make decisions that align with our true path. Another form of emotional manipulation is using threats, deadlines, or emotional coercion to accelerate decision-making. Statements like, "If you don't do this now, you'll regret it," are designed to evoke fear, pressure, and a sense of helplessness in the victim. Spiritually, this tactic is an attempt to disconnect someone from their intuition, forcing them to act from a place of fear rather than wisdom. In spiritual teachings, we learn that when we are aligned with our higher self, we are guided with patience and calm, knowing that there is always a time for everything. Fear-based decisions often lead us further away from our true purpose, keeping us in cycles of uncertainty and regret. The spiritual path encourages us to take time to reflect and consider our decisions deeply. When others pressure us to act quickly, it becomes important to pause and reconnect with our own inner wisdom. By cultivating mindfulness and grounding ourselves in the present moment, we can resist the pull of external pressures and make decisions that are aligned with our soul's true purpose. Creating a false sense of urgency diminishes our power to choose with clarity and alignment. Spiritually, we are reminded that true power lies in our ability to remain calm, centered, and trusting that we are always supported in making the right choices at the right time. By practicing discernment and taking time to process, we honor ourselves in the natural flow of the universe. Thank you for watching and diving into these eye-opening signs with me. Now that you're armed with this knowledge, you can start spotting the red flags and protecting yourself from toxic influences. But remember, awareness is just the first step. Trust your instincts and set those boundaries. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you encountered any of these signs in your own life? Drop a comment below and share your experiences, or let me know which sign stood out the most to you. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss more insightful content like this. Stay strong, stay aware, and take care of your peace. See you in the next video.